Welcome to the Mycelium Network podcast, a podcast all about early stage web developers and the mentors and teachers that helped them along the way.
Hey, Bri. Welcome to the Mycelium Network podcast.
Thanks for having me, Schalk.
It's a big pleasure. So I listened to a podcast called Beginner Maps, and that is where I learned about you first. Well, not first. I kind of knew about you because of the community space, which we'll dig into in a second. But I listened to that podcast episode, and there was a couple of things that intrigued me, and I thought, seeing that I'm running a community and community is so integral to open source and then also to especially people early in their careers and in all of this stuff, I think it would be great to just have somebody on that we could just talk about why community is so awesome. So with all of that out of the way, I'm not going to introduce you. I'm going to hand the mic to you and let you tell us about yourself, where you are, what do you do, and what gets you up in the morning.
Yeah, thank you. I'm honored to be here to get to share more of my experience and mostly just some of the mistakes I've made, probably. I'm Bri Leever. I grew up mostly in Pennsylvania, but my family moved to the Middle East when I was 16. So my parents were teachers, and we moved to Qatar. And, or Qatar, or Qatar, or Qatar, or however you prefer. And then I came back over to the US for school and moved up to Portland, Oregon, where I caught my big community break. I never would have articulated it that way at the time. I was partnering with a social enterprise to start a very robust ambassador program. And so, once I left that role after 7 years, that's really when I started to, I saw my role as more of sales and marketing. But everything that I did every single day was community development, and arguably some of the trickiest types of community development, where there's like some very real sales quotas that you're also hitting, but it's deeply relational and you're building leaders. And so happy to talk more about that experience. But once I left that role, in February of 2020, if we can all just picture where we were in that blissful February of 2020, quit my job literally weeks before the pandemic hit. And then just the path unfolded to starting my own consulting work, helping brands become community led. So I started with sort of the light version of what I had built at that previous company called Seiko. And over time, just really discovered more of the world of, I was like, I haven't just invented community. This is actually something that many people at many different companies are thinking about. And I got a lot more immersed in the community world, and have been just so pleased to get to partner with people who are building incredible communities and learn from them, but also help kind of be the bridge for brands that we're still in such an early stage of the community as an industry. So it's really exciting to be at the kind of forefront of helping establish some of that common language even, and helping brands understand what is community and what is it not. So happy to differentiate and dive into some of those things, but that's a little bit about me. Oh, and now I live in Hawaii. Then I moved to Hawaii too.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I've been to Hawaii once. I had the privilege to go there thanks to an all hands for one of the clients I work at. It is a beautiful place, that is for sure. My niece lives there as well. The time difference, it was rough to be able to contact my family. It was so hard.
Yes, it is the exact opposite from South Africa. Oh, and that reminds me, I didn't answer your question of what gets me up in the morning. And I haven't been asked, I don't know if I've been asked it from that angle before. And, I just to get existential here for a moment, I feel like what gets me up in the morning now is this deep feeling that it really does all work out. And that might sound kind of like coming from a place of pessimism, but it's actually coming from a deep hopefulness that, the future is bright, and I feel really hopeful about not just my life, but also like the people around me and the place that I live. And so very hopeful that it always works out one way or another.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we all need a little bit of hope right now. I think the world is in an interesting place. But so if you can surround yourself with people that help you find hope and all of that, I think it's a really good place to be. And community plays into this. And so I'm a strong believer. I believe in community. I don't think it's, yeah, you do believe in community. And it comes from the whole open source world that I've been involved in. It's kind of core to what open source is about. So, open source is largely a community effort. It maybe starts with one person that has a need and then builds something to fill that need. But then oftentimes they find that, but there's other people that have the same problem and this solves their problem, but there's little tweaks and things that they need. And before you know it, there's a really nice community formed around this little project. And with some of the projects that I've worked on, I've really seen how impactful it can be to have a active community. But there's also a side to it where it's very important to nurture that community and to respect them, which maybe we'll dig into that a little bit later. But you being a community leader, obviously I'm kind of preaching to the choir here, but I'm just wondering, like, for people early in their career, like for our community, it's web developers, but that doesn't matter that much. What do you see as the main benefits of being part of a community?
Yeah, thanks so much for kind of laying the groundwork there. And before I dive into that, well, one, it's, I have two kind of groundworks to lay in order to answer that. And one is, it feels community is very fundamental to the human experience. It's how we have stayed safe throughout evolution. We are literally programmed and wired for community and belonging and connection. So I'm not reinventing the wheel. I'm not saying anything new when I say that. But I think it's important to note when we have the conversation about, like, well, what's the benefit, or will this work? My posture towards community is kind of, it's less of a, like, this is a guinea pig and it might die, it might not, if we're going to try the whole community thing. That's, I think, the wrong way to look at it. And it's more of, I prefer to posture myself as a trailblazer. I'm like, there is a path, there is a way through. We might have to really do some pivoting to find it, but this is it's so baked into the human experience that I just have yet to come across a scenario where community just doesn't make sense as, like, either an element of your business or just a facet of life. So just to kind of set that up. And then something else that you said led me to this thought. The product approach to people's problems is, you have this really specific problem, and so let's design a product or a service that helps alleviate that on some level. The community-led approach to that is, here's a group of people who all have a similar problem. Let's create a landscape where they can break open that problem and solve it together. And what's really amazing about the community-led approach is that from the product side, if you just solve one problem once, you lose contact with how that problem evolves over time, or how maybe your product or service solves the problem, but then a new problem arises simply by the nature of solving the old one. And you kind of lose touch pretty easily with how that continues to evolve. Whereas once you have declared that, instead of just solving that one problem, we're more interested in creating a landscape where people are solving these types of problems. You have a much closer perspective, and you can see how that continues to evolve over time. So as someone who, as humans who constantly have problems that are changing and ebbing and flowing and evolving, I think finding a community, whether it's professional or personal, that is asking the same questions to help untangle some of your deepest problems or issues or desires. That's going to, it doesn't just help you in the present and help you feel like less alone and a sense of camaraderie that you're not the only one who's wrestling with that, but it also gives you continued tools and resources for how to approach your specific problem, not just today, but also in the future.
Yeah, that's great. And I agree. I think that is one of the things, just like I mentioned, like web developers, but specifically the community I am involved with, the one that I started, is focused on early stage people. And for them, especially feeling like they're not alone, like they're not the only one struggling with this specific part of a language or something, I've seen it many times when somebody have asked and somebody else said, I struggled with that exact same thing. And this is how it's always such a great feeling for somebody to say, oh, okay, it's not just me. So yeah, I think a community, like even that small, seemingly small aspect is such a big benefit you get from being part of a community. You mentioned the difference between a community formed around a product or a problem. Well, not around a product that's trying to solve a problem, but then the other way, which is the community-led approach. And you touched on what that means, but I'd like you to dig into that just a little bit deeper about what exactly is the difference between how many people might think about community and what community-led specifically means.
Yeah, it's a great question that deserves differentiation. So in the marketing world that I come from, our language the community language has been hijacked over the last couple decades with social media. So we tend to confuse community for audience. And there's a lot of different kind of angles that I could approach this question with, but I'll speak to this one because it's the most common misconception that I see. So your audience is the space into which you broadcast your message. It's a very linear relationship. There is the broadcaster and the person sitting in the audience. Community turns the emphasis of the relationship away from one primary speaker and says, instead of focusing on the relationship between the speaker and the audience, we actually want to focus on fostering those connections between audience members. That's when we enter into community. So a community-led approach is really less about, if you're tempted to ask questions like, okay, what does our audience need and how can we create more content to help them? And it's more, the community-led approach asks, how can we create a space where our community members can start collaborating together to solve these issues? How can we prompt them, incentivize them to create, if instead of us creating all of the content or being the hub or being the ones with all of the answers, how can we prompt our community members to find the answers for themselves? So there's lots of different, I don't know that I have an all-star definition. We're working on it in the background. I'm working on clarifying all of my definitions here, but I would say that's the most common misconception about. We think community-led is really just a really engaged audience of fans, but a community is so much more, and it's so much more work behind the scenes because it's not about the person on the stage, and it takes a lot more work because you're not just feeding people, you're teaching them how to cook and you're asking them to share recipes with each other. And then this one person who's been creating phenomenal meals, you're like, hey, would you teach the rest of the people how to make this meal? So it's a lot more difficult to influence people's behaviors than it is just to serve them a meal. But in the end, it creates the solid foundation that is so strong it can't really be broken.
Yeah, that's lovely. I agree with that. And I think like from a technical perspective specifically, or in a technical audience, it's that whole idea where you don't give the person the answer, but you guide them in the direction where they might have an easier time finding the answer. Because I think we are all, well, most of us, if somebody comes to you with a problem, you immediately go into a solutions mode where you want to just give them the answer because you think that that is the best thing in the moment that you can do. But in actual fact, you learn much better through struggling a little bit, trying something, and then asking a question, being led in a direction, but still having to do some work yourself. And I think it's that whole IKEA effect that they talk about, where just the fact that you're assembling this thing by yourself make it so much more valuable to you than if it came pre-assembled. I think all of those things play together. And so I like this idea where it's not just a person speaking to an audience, but it's like the community speaking to each other as well. That is definitely something that's important to me. Like, I don't want to be, everybody shouldn't sit and wait for me to say something. Everybody shouldn't sit around, wait for me to say, this is what we're going to do. I want them to come to me with initiative as well and say, we've been talking about this thing and we would like to do this. And I can enable it maybe because I have, people that I can connect with, or I have resources or experience or whatever the case may be. I love that. That's great. No, I think you did a really good job of explaining it. So yeah.
Thank you. It is I'll add one little bit to it. It's so funny how my consulting practice has changed with my clients. And now it feels like, when I work with clients to craft and launch their community, it's like we do all of this work to kind of vision cast and brainstorm and dream up like what would the ideal community space look like. And then we basically just pack it away. And I'm like, okay, so now we're going to all of this. I want you to forget it. And we're going to start with like such a tiny little iteration of this dream. And what we need to have happen is we need your community members to be the ones who are like, oh man, I wish we had a place for matchups. Like, oh man, I wish we had like a space where we could like just dedicated to our wins. And like, could we do an event where could I host it? So it's like, I'm like, okay, we know all the things and they're assumptions. We don't know that that's how it's like completely going to unfold, but you kind of have to, it's a really good community manager actually holds back all of their brilliant ideas and seeds and fosters and waits for them to bubble up from the community and like holds that tension and is like so dedicated to like, I am not going to be the hero of this story, that they are willing to wait and embrace the tension and let their community members bring it up.
That's awesome. And that is rare. I think this is, I'm always so negative about social media, and it has its place, but it's also caused a lot of problems. And I think one of the problems it caused is this idea of the hero of the day. And I think it's fostered this idea that there's always this one individual that's the hero that comes out the other end, solves everybody's problems. So I think people find it hard these days to hold back, not to be that person, from different angles. So yeah, it's great to have this different perspective because I think it plays into the whole move fast and break things, like this idea of, okay, let's dream big and then let's go back and let's be realistic maybe, and let's start slow and methodical and build this thing over time. I think that's a more scalable, sustainable solution over time. So I had a look at your blog, among other things, and on your About page, well, actually not just your blog, your actual company page, and there's a link to the About page. And there's a sentence on there that I really liked, which is, consider this your safe space to ask stupid questions and get the tools you need to learn what you don't know yet about brand communities. And that's what I aim to do with the Mycelium Network, is to create a space where people feel safe and comfortable to ask, air quotes, stupid questions, because really there aren't any stupid questions. It's just, again, this whole social media thing that makes you feel like you should know everything. No, you shouldn't. So I'm learning this as I go. But for somebody who's been in this world for a while, what do you think are some of the key things to think about when you're creating a space that people will find as safe and welcoming?
So that's a great question. Number one, above and beyond anything else, is transparency and clear communication. That, to me, builds trust. I try just in my day-to-day life to be open and transparent about where I'm coming from, and everything from my pricing to my process to how my work has evolved. I've been doing a lot more processing in public with my writing and my content, and I think part of that is just to build that trust. So that's number one. I think what's really important as a guide for people in the entering into the community space is to display also equal parts empathy and authority. So I like to, for me, I'm speaking about it. I'm thinking in the context of partnering with clients. You're thinking about it in the context of fostering your community. And one of the ways that I do that is I try to normalize, because there are a lot of misconceptions about community, and oftentimes in my work with clients, we have to first break those down before we can start building. And I've rushed that process in the past and not set my clients up for success every time. So I like to normalize and just kind of name, what is the existing ideology or belief that I don't know if they have it or not, but I can kind of say it's really common and really normal and it's really natural to think this because we've been conditioned in these ways, and then offer, but in my experience, and so that's the empathy part. Now we move into authority. In my experience building communities, it doesn't always play out that way or it doesn't play out the way that we expect or that we've been told like it should if we were talking to an audience, as an example. So balancing equal parts empathy and authority, I think, I hope helps people feel like they can both be honest about where they're at and questions that they have, but also trust my direction and not trust that I'm always going to have every answer to every question. There's plenty of calls where I'm like, that's a great question, and I don't know the answer to that, but I'm going to find the answer. And my rule of thumb is never make it up on the spot. If you don't know the answer, just say you don't know the answer and you're going to go find someone who does. That to me is also builds trust rather than just BSing your way through things, which I'm also fairly good at sometimes, but I try to avoid. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. It does. And yeah, we all BS a little bit sometimes. And it's like a white lie. I think sometimes it's okay. Sometimes you need to do that. So for our community, we're heavily invested in GitHub as a platform because that, is where, as they say, where code happens and where people collaborate, especially in the coding space. We use Discord as a place where we can have open communication. I chose that because there's a lot of overlap between people who write code and design and people who play games. And so they're generally already there. So it's one thing that I've learned is go where the community already is instead of trying to pull them somewhere else. So I have two feelings about that. The one is, yes, I agree with that. The one challenging aspect I have with that, which I haven't totally figured out or decided how I'm going to deal with it, is, but whatever large portion of the community is on a platform you don't feel good about, but the only way you're going to reach them is if you go there, and then perhaps you can influence them by being transparent and explaining why you think this is not the most healthiest place to be. So with all that in mind, I had the question phrased as, what is your favorite community platforms and why? And that is still my question, but I'd like to throw one extra one in there, which is, which are some of your favorite communities and why?
Oh, man. Yeah. Okay. And then there's another hidden question in there, which is, so there's kind of like the three core places where people like have built community and kind of like hodgepodge it together a little bit, and but hate to be. And that is Discord, Slack, and Facebook groups. And there is sort of this I want to say myth, but I don't know that we can like disprove it yet. But there's this feeling that, but everyone is there. And so we have to go there. But the one thing that I would challenge on what you said was, if you yourself are having the feeling like, but I feel a lot of tension and a lot of friction building my community in this space, it's very likely that you are attracting community members who also feel the same. It's I'd say like a clearer example is Facebook groups, because this is purely anecdotal experience and not data driven, but everyone who wants to build a community in a Facebook group, the only reason is because they think that people are there. And every community member I've ever interviewed who's in a Facebook group says, the only reason I'm on Facebook is because this group is here. And so I do have before I get to your question, I want to have like a very slight aside, because I do have an analogy for, it's kind of, to me, like building your Target or your Starbucks cafe inside of the Target, so you can like the hope is kind of like, well, people are already here. They're doing busy commerce things. So like, maybe we'll just distract them into this space, which isn't, some communities like are frankly not providing enough value. That is the only way they're going to get engagement, is to distract people in. But just as quickly, they are distracted out of your community. And so it's really hard to foster for like good, hard community work that takes time and more attention span than social media affords us. My point is usually to my clients, the type of space that we're trying to build is more like a coffee boutique. It's like we're trying to build a space where we can foster these connections. And so, yes, it is going to be harder to get people. They have to come to this space. It's not just going to happen because they were running an errand at Target. But if we are providing enough value in this space, shouldn't that be what we want to happen? That they're getting so much value from this space that they're willing to click on the button and log into the platform that isn't just a distraction. So that's my very like gentle nudge because the problem is there are these all-in-one platforms that are accessible, are a lot more robust in considering like a diverse ecosystem for a community platform, whereas these traditional platforms are pretty limited in some of the features and technology that they bring. So I want to pause there before I dive into the rest, but do you have any comments on that?
Yeah, no, that's great. Yeah, I love that. That makes total sense. No. You've convinced me that now I'm even more interested to hear which platforms and communities you've enjoyed working with or creating or being a part of.
Yeah. So I'll start with platforms and then I'll move into communities, because I do a community dissection series. So once a week, we dissect a new community with a couple other people in the community professional world, which is super fun. So I'll talk about that. On the platform side, there's kind of two distinct categories for community platforms. And one is like the enterprise level community platform that has a lot of, the more you pay, the more customization you get, but you can really customize the experience and like the layout and the format. And, you can spend as much money as you want to. So platforms that would be in that category would be Khoros, Insided, Vanilla as examples. More recently, in the last couple of years, you have had a lot more of these, what I call creator community platforms. So people who have a podcast or a newsletter or an audience or a course. And these platforms they're much more accessible pricing wise. But what I've found is that they also are pretty they are conducive to the needs of brand communities. And for me, when I'm partnering with clients, we're just launching a brand community. We're not ready to make the brand isn't ready to make a $30,000 enterprise level investment in community. They want to start small and start tinkering and start growing like pretty organically. So I've mostly built my brand communities and creator communities in this second tier, which is some of the platform examples are Heartbeat, Circle. Mighty Networks is like the oldest example. I really don't recommend them, but so I'll stay away from my tangent on that. But Heartbeat, Circle, Mighty Networks. There's a new one called Melting Spot coming out of France. And there's one that kind of sits in the middle of the two, Gradual, which I've really loved. They're more of like for communities that are really centered around like bigger conferences. They have really phenomenal like event capabilities. So those are some of the examples. There's tons more. I'm always trying to keep up with the less the community, what I call community tools, and more of the all-in-one platforms, because that tends to take a lot of the lift off of the shoulders of the community managers that I work with. So that's my scope on platforms.
Yeah, that's great. I've heard about Heartbeat before. I listened to the story. I think it was on Beginner Maps. They interviewed the founder of Heartbeat, and he mentioned that when Heartbeat hit the inflection point, they reached out to you to say, help, and you helped them grow. So, yeah, I was interested in looking at Heartbeat, so it's interesting that you mention it now. Now I'm definitely going to check it out.
Yeah, I love getting to partner with their team. It was really and anytime you get to create a community of community builders, it's just the best, because they know exactly what it's like, and they know how to talk to people. I like to joke that 90% of our job as community builders is literally just teaching people how to talk to each other. So that was a super, super fun project, and I highly recommend them as a platform.
So communities, is there any communities you're a part of that you have found particularly not like valuable, but also maybe inspiring?
Yeah. Yes. Okay. Let's circle back to that. So, I'll start with, communities that I am a part of. I will say one that we just dissected that I have been a part of since like almost when they first launched was the Circle community. So that's a community for customers who are using Circle. And it's grown a lot, and I think that they're kind of feeling those growing pains, but from the very beginning, Mathilde was the first community manager, and now she has a team, and I was very, very impressed with the level of engagement that they had in that community and people jumping in to help each other. And the events that they ran provided a ton of value. So I've always been really impressed with that community. You can only be a part of it if you are a Circle customer, but it's a great perk for joining that platform. And then as far as communities that I'm not a part of, but that I have dissected, I'm a huge fan of the Lego Ideas community. I'm not even a Lego person, but I just love their community architecture so much. It's so good. It's clearly a product community. It's all focused on like designing Lego sets. And so normally I try to kind of look for communities that are a little bit more cross-functional and hit several departments, but they just narrowed in so well and like nailed the product side of the community. So that's we dissected that one fully, and like you have people who are designing sets and they like have hit the whatever star Ruby extraordinaire level of badges because of like how many sets have been voted into existence in production. And people are like, you'll see them like share that status in their like all of their social media. Like it's been the honor and the privilege of being a part of that community and designing in that community has been so elevated through their work and like design. I think it's just a phenomenally, it incorporates gamification in a way that is like really powerful.
Yeah, I've heard about the Lego community and the Lego Builders community. It is incredible. And I think I think so. Give me your input about what you think. I guess when you look at a community like that, that's very like locked in on the product, but still manages to have this like really creative feel to it. I guess you could substitute product for not goal, but I think what you're trying to achieve with your community. So if you're trying to educate people, so you can probably swap out product for educate, and that's your focus. So if you look at something like the Lego community, maybe you can say, let's see what they do, but instead of focusing on a product, I'm going to focus it on an outcome, like educating people, getting them their first job, whatever the case may be. Does that make sense?
Yes, 100%. This is actually, it connects really well. I gathered a couple community professionals at the end of last year to talk about like, where should community live in your organization? And that's really where you get these different objectives. So like you can have a customer success community that is focused on helping educate members on how to better use the product, and also like retaining members. You have customer support communities, which tend to be kind of like, I don't love them. They can tend to be kind of boring. They're just really glorified help forums. But no shade to the customer support community people out there. Oh no, I'm getting hot now. But I also really, we talked about in that discussion about marketing communities being where the objective is to like understand and activate the customer as well in order to come alongside of your organization's goals for sales or new sales or repeat sales. So yeah, it really, for me, it doesn't matter as much. It really depends on what the organization is trying to achieve, where the community originates from. Once it has some legs and once it's kind of proven itself a little bit, I think it's very wise to start moving into other departmental objectives as well. Because the way that I say it is, if you treat community like a product initiative, or if you treat community like a marketing initiative, it will only serve your marketing goals. If you treat community like a business objective and a business initiative, it will affect your entire business. So it really just depends on how you view it and how much you want it to affect your business.
Yeah, true. I'm loving the bird sounds, by the way. I remember when I was in Hawaii, when we got up in the morning and we went out. So the hotel, it had like a foyer, but it was open, so right up to the roof. So in the morning, when you went out of your hotel room, it's just birds, and it's all these different sounds. It's so beautiful. So yeah, I'm loving that. So don't worry about it. It's going to just make the podcast even better.
Okay, good.
I also heard the other day, if you listen to 3 seconds of bird sounds, it improves your mood immediately. So there we go. We're also improving people's mood.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Yeah, there's this little, it's so funny. I have a window right in front of my desk and I can see all the bird drama unfolding. There's little pairs that will squawk at each other, and it's really cute. There's never ending bird drama going on here in front of my office.
That must be distracting but lovely at the same time.
Yeah, exactly.
So, going in a little bit of a different direction, but again, on your website and on the blog side, you had this blog post that is, what is your community's superpower? And it's actually a questionnaire / survey. So you kind of answer questions, and then at the end it reveals like something about it. And I did it, and it identified me as a confidant, which is surprisingly accurate. But one of the questions that I've found really hard to choose between the options that was available is the question, which of the following characteristics is the most important to you in friendship? And so I ended up choosing energy, but I was super torn because all 3 is actually important to me. So I'm curious, how did you choose the 3 traits that you put in that specific question?
Yeah. Oh, I'm so glad you took it. That quiz was, it's like, quizzes are so silly. And I'd never made one before, but I just decided like, okay, I'm just going to do this and do something that I know a lot about, which is how you feel when you're a community manager and some of those weaknesses and strengths and how they play into each other. So one, after I'm done answering, I would love to know what resonated with you about the confidant. Cause it was really cool when I released that quiz, like the number of people who were like, this was like kind of eerily accurate, or like people saying like, I screenshotted like the advice you gave at the end because I need to like hear this every day. And it was really cool. So yeah, the core of this experience was honestly just like really putting myself back in my shoes as a community manager at the company that I was in for 7 years. And I remember times where I was called upon to be like the visionary and the leader and to lead like unapologetically this group of almost 1,000. We called them fellows. And I remember times where I felt like I was the only one like protecting the group from certain members who were like really just eating away at our culture and our values. And then I also remember times where it's like I didn't feel very extroverted, but I also needed to be the person who was going to be the safe space for people. And like, it was just a requirement of my job to hold a lot of space for people and where they were at and what they were coming to the table with. So that was the spirit of this, those 3 questions. So loyalty, energy, and kindness. Loyalty was the one that matched to the confidant. And the feeling that I had with that one was, you feel it is the confidant, the kind of like spirit of the confidant is this responsibility as a protector and sort of guardian of the space. And so you're thinking through like, if we're making a decision, like, how is this going to impact, like, what are all of the ramifications of this? Because your intention is to like protect the people who you have been given responsibility for. And so loyalty felt like the one that stood out in friendship for that personality. Energy was more of the dreamer and the visionary. So I feel this with like, I think one of the most important things to me is like, I hate this buzzword, but synergy is like just such a magical thing for me. And like synergy, energy, like that spark that you feel with someone when you meet them, or like making a new friend and you just are like, oh, like you just get it. You just understand me on this like intrinsic level. Like that feels like the dreamer, the visionary side of me. And then kindness was this matched for me with the host. And that was the spirit of like someone who really, like I said, can hold enormous amounts of space for their people while honoring like also what they need. And so for me, how that manifested was like maybe not being the most extroverted person in the room, but if I can find my like 2 to 3 people who I can pour into at an event, that would be a huge win for me. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that was some of the spirit behind it. And I'd love to hear what resonated with you.
Yeah, no, I love that. I love your explanation. Thanks. It's really insightful. So the confidant aspect, I don't know. It's always been a thing with me, and I don't know why that is. And with my wife, it's the same thing. It's as if people are drawn to me when they are going through a tough time. They feel like they can speak to me and that I will listen and, understand, or at least be compassionate about it. So if I'm in a meeting, for example, and I see that somebody in the meeting looks a little off, or, they look like something's not quite, they're not happy, essentially. I'm the person who would afterwards go on Slack and private message them and say, are you okay? Because it looked like you were a little down, or are you just tired maybe, or what's wrong? So I do that kind of thing. And then in the community that I'm running at the moment, that is important to me. If somebody disappears that's been really active, I would reach out to them and say, hey, is there something that's happened? Is it somebody in the community? Was it me? Is there something you're missing? So I'm always, being the confidant, I guess, to somebody else to say, if you have anything to tell me. It's okay. I can be the catalyst between you and somebody else. So I think that's why it resonated with me. It's always been a part of my life. It's not that I seek it out. It sort of comes towards me. And embraced it, I guess, at this point.
Amazing. Oh, I love that. It probably serves you so well, too, in your role as a podcaster. I could imagine you're holding space for a lot of people here.
Yeah, for sure. I think it does help. So, and jumping topics again, you're a business owner. And you wrote a post in your blog about learnings from a year in your business. Now, quite a few folks in the community that I've spoken to don't necessarily want to switch to being in tech or start in tech because they want just a job at a big tech company or some tech company. They actually see it as an opportunity to create an opportunity for themselves. And in the community, the people that's in the community currently tends to be from developing countries. So for them especially, getting a job is a little tricky because maybe there's not that much opportunity where they live, and getting a job from a tech company in the US or Europe is not always possible because of, laws and all these kind of tricky things. So for them, it's like, I want to do, but at the same time, they're so scared because it's, I'm doing it myself and it's frightening most of the time. So through your journey since February 2020, what have you learned? What has been some of the tough things, mistakes you've made, things you've learned, anything like that you'd like to share?
Yeah. Oh, well, we could be here all day, but I'll just boil it down to a couple things that really stick out to me. So one thing, I don't know that I feel confident enough to recommend this to everyone, but this is how it happened for me. And I do highly recommend putting yourself in this position, even though it's very scary. So I quit my job. I had 3 months of savings 3 months of saved income. And so that was my deadline. And I honestly thought I was going to get a new job. I didn't think I was going to start my own business when I quit. So, basically the first thing is there's kind of 2 methods. One is you can be working a full-time job and trying to start your own thing. And that way you have some of that safety net. And for me and my personality, I'm a very all in person. I found I was looking for a job for 3 months before I quit. And it was so hard for me to be all in on that job and also be trying to find a new one. So, as much as you're able, I would say, give yourself 3 months of savings, take away any other distraction and just go for it with that. Cause then honestly, it has to work. It just has to. And you will do things and you will figure it out and you will force yourself to do things that you would never have done to get it to work if you had always had that buffer and that safety of full-time work on the side. So it's scary. It's even scary to feel like I'm recommending people do that because it just sort of happened that way for me. But I think it's one of the core reasons that my business is where it is because I didn't have another option. So that's one thing, setting yourself up with the right environment and the right incentive, as in that draining bank account. The second thing that I did during that time that really made a huge impact was, and you probably heard this on Beginner Maps, I was gifted a book called Designing Your Life by some amazing mentors. And I just, a friend told me if you Google Designing Your Life, my video is on their page. It's so embarrassing, but I'm also so proud of it because I'm I am their number one fan. Don't tell anyone. But it's honestly a phenomenal framework for how to think about your career and gives you some really practical, application and some really practical exercises to work through while also just dispelling some of the myths that we believe about our career journey. So that book gave me the framework and the application and some of the language and belief that I needed. And it's not a book that is telling you to go start your own business, but that is what unfolded for me because of the book. And the third and final thing that I haven't read the book in quite a while, so I don't know if I might be making this up, but I think that the book said something to the effect of, if you have 100 coffees with people, like, you'll find your next dream job. That's what I internalized, at least. And so, but their point being, like, the vast majority of jobs are never even posted online. They're hired, like, through internal networks. So the only way that, like, the best possible thing that you can do is start talking to people. And so, again, me thinking that I'm looking for a job, I started asking people to coffee. About 20 coffees in, I started to, like, all of a sudden I had this, like, pitch deck about why your brand should become community led. And it was like the coffees actually with people actually, like, untangled for me what I actually was seeking. Because I started very broad with, like, I don't know, I'm just trying to understand, like, what I could do next. Will you talk with me for 30 minutes? And it turned into, okay, so I'm starting a consulting company, and this is my pitch, and I'd love for you to listen to it. And so I had 100 coffees in 90 days, and that gave me enough business for my first year and a half.
Wow, that's cool. Yeah, I've heard about the power of coffee chats, for sure. You're not the first person to mention this. So, yep, go out there and drink some coffee with people. It opens up doors.
Yep. Go drink a lot of coffee. And if you don't know where to start, like, I started with a list of 40 people, who I knew. And I said, at the end of every call, like, after hearing me share, is there anyone who you think would be interesting for me to talk to? And that was a really helpful way for me to continue to grow the list to get to. If you are willing to have 100 coffees, you will find your next step. Or if you're trying to launch something, it will happen within 100. It just does. There's something magical about it. So,
yeah. I mean, it comes back to the community aspect, and where we have this natural tendency. I think just talking through something with somebody else often makes you. It's in programming, we have this thing called rubber ducking. So it's this idea where you talk to somebody else about a problem. The original plan was you were going to ask them, I'm stuck. What am I going to do here? And by talking through the problem with them, you find the answer yourself. So it's almost like you can put a rubber duck on your desk and just talk to the rubber duck, and you'll figure it out.
I love that. Oh my gosh. We were just talking about this yesterday, because I also have a, like, camper van business here on the island, and the renters, like, busted some stuff, of course. So we were, like, fixing it, and my partner was, like, on top of the van, and he's like, can you just come up here? And, like, the second I get on top of the van, he's like, figured it out. Like, it's literally just the presence of another person will just, like, untangle all the threads for you.
Yeah, for sure. I'm a big believer in that. So we're in an interesting time at the moment, and especially in the tech industry, there's been an incredible amount of layoffs. So I can just imagine that a lot of people, because there's quite a few of them in the community, in the Mycelium Network community, who have decided to switch careers. And they've decided to get into the tech industry. And some of them quit their jobs to do this. And I'm sure a lot of them might feel like, I made a big mistake. So doing that when the world is in a good place and there's not all these layoffs is scary enough, as we just talked about when you start your own business. So for those people who are unsure, not sure if they made the right decision, but they do feel that it is what they want to do, like, do you have any advice for these folks on how to stay motivated and how to just generally deal with tough times?
Yeah, and I can speak from my experience as a consultant. Part of why I am a consultant is because of seasons like this in the, like, salaried work world. So the traditional belief is that there's more instability in consulting than there is in a full-time job. But my perspective is, as a consultant, I feel a lot of agency around, if I don't have enough clients, I can go get on the phone and like find more clients. There's X number of different strategies that I can try and pivot and try again and fail and try again to find more clients. And eventually it does just work because it has to. Versus a scenario where I have all of my eggs in one basket with one company. And as a result, there might be something that is completely outside of my control that now my entire basket of eggs has been thrown out the window. So, which is what we're seeing right now with layoffs. So for me, I actually prefer, it's less about like, less or more instability, because I would say like anyone who's been laid off right now would say like, yeah, a full-time salaried role is not like as stable as I thought. I could actually be let go at any moment for reasons that I may or may not have control over. And so for me, it's more, I focus more on like posturing myself in a way where I have like the most control over my environment and over like the outcomes. So for me, that I feel that with consulting. You might have a phenomenal salaried role and not feel that. But I prefer it on this side. So, advice for people who are like in the hustle with me, I'm like, just keep going and find people who are wrestling with the same things. Like last year, I created a mastermind of other community consultants. I think it's often like who I would very easily be able to look at and say, that is my exact competition in this work. Like it would be so easy to be like, wow, aren't you guys like competing with each other? And I chose those exact people to say like, actually, will you come and be my community? Will you come and be the ones who support me and I support you? Because really the people that we like, community and competition are 1 degree removed. And it's really more about how you choose to see it rather than what actually is. So if you're struggling, like find other people who are in the exact same space as you, like look to your competition because they're probably like one of the first places you need to look, and invite them into a deeper relationship together, because that has been one of the biggest things that's like supported me on the low days when I'm like, I have my like crew now that I text and I'm like, like this contract just fell through, or like, this person just like judged this thing and what do I do now? And they just like always bring me back down to earth. And what's incredible is that like the more you actually get to know each other, the more you realize like we are all niched in our own areas. And so if a client, comes to me that isn't a perfect fit for what I do, I now have a network of people I can refer them to. So that's my advice.
Yeah, agree 100%. It's the whole scarcity mindset thing where people are too afraid to speak to people that do what they do because they're scared of they're going to take your piece of the pie and there's just not enough for everybody, which is untrue. We need to move out of that space.
100%. It's easy to fall into at times like this. It's easy to think there's not enough work. And I have to believe every single day there is enough work for everyone. This is an abundant world and there is more than enough work to go around.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, thanks to the internet, we have the world as our, potential clients and potential friends and partners and communities and everything. So, yeah. Well, this has been amazing. It felt very natural, which is always great. It's almost been an hour and I can't believe it. So one last question. What is the best piece of advice you've ever received?
I deliberately tried not to think about this too much because I wanted my gut to try to lead on this. And the first thing that came to mind was just now was my friend Shikako, who's just like a spiritual guide here on the island. And she told me, Bri, you need to say what you want first. And I was like, Shikako, I'm like what they call a bigger personality. So my job is actually to I need to be really careful with that because I could accidentally steamroll people. And my job is to really just work on controlling that and making sure that other people have enough space. And she just totally, it was the first time I'd ever been told that, truly. And she was like, nope. She was like, your brain works in such a different way She's like, if you are always, if you let other people speak first, you're always going to modify and adjust what you're thinking and what you were going to say because you are adapting and adjusting for everyone else. And so she was like, your practice for this next year is to say what you want and to say it first. And I was like, that sounds like a lot. Like, that just sounds like a person who is a lot. Like, I'm really scared of being perceived that way, especially as a woman. Like, really, you're just talking about like the bitch in the room. Like, really? I was so nervous. But I just trusted her and I was like, okay, I'm just gonna, Chicago told me I have to. Like, it's not me, it's her. If anything goes wrong, I'll just blame her. It's not actually me acting of my own volition. But I started doing that. And, it was like quite comical at first because, in like a group call, they'd be like, does anyone have any thoughts? And I would share. And it's like, my thoughts are just completely in left field compared to everyone else's. but in such a, like, in a way that actually did kind of open up the space for other people to share like a little bit more non-traditional things. So I've been putting that into practice. It was very liberating and very freeing to feel like I, as a big personality, had permission to speak first when I really conditioned myself to hold that back. And I choose to believe that it gives, rather than taking up space that like, quote, belongs to other people, it actually creates more space for other people to also honestly share what they want and what they think. So that's what I choose to believe.
That's lovely. Yeah, love that. I think people shouldn't be afraid to speak because all our voices are valuable and should be heard. So I think that's a good place to start from. Yeah, I think that's good advice. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, Bri, this was really great, as I just said, but yeah, I had to reiterate. So thank you so much for joining. All the best with your company and all the work you do. I'll definitely be following it. I'm subscribed to your podcast now and the YouTube channel, so I'm digging into all the things. I'm definitely going to, I wanted to watch one of those dissections yesterday, but I didn't get the time, but I'm going to do this weekend. I'm going to listen to the Lego one, because that one sounds really interesting. So thanks so much for joining and all of the very best.
Awesome. Thank you, Schalk. Can't wait to stay in touch, and best of luck to everyone listening.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Mycelium Network podcast. If you're not already, please subscribe, star, and leave a review for us in your podcatcher of choice. This helps others find us and helps us make a better podcast for you, our listeners. You can also find and follow us on Twitter @NetworkMycelium and join the community on Discord. All the links are available in the show notes.